Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author, Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Susan Walter. The winner of the not terribly prestigious WIFTS Screenwriting Award for All I Wish, the 2018 film she wrote and directed starring Sharon Stone, Susan Walter recently added novelist to an eclectic resume that also includes failed concert violinist, unwatchable TV news reporter, and dazed mother to two teenage daughters, of course, which I completely understand. Her first 2 mystery thrillers are set in the movie business, but then she discovered there are places that are even more dangerous. With the help of friends in more interesting professions than hers, an FBI agent, an Olympic downhiller, a pilot, she is now murdering people on airplanes, on ski hills, and in safe houses while on the run from organized crime. Susan's first 2 suspense thrillers, Good as Dead and Over Her Dead Body, were Amazon First Reads Editor's Picks, and both hit #1 on Audible across all categories. Her September 2023 release, Lie by the Pool, a suspense thriller about an unhoused woman who stows away in a Beverly Hills pool house, was an Audible editor's pick and debuted in the top 10. Her new release, Running Cold, about an Olympic biathlete who escapes arrest in a blizzard, comes out on October 8th. So it is out as you're listening to this, and she can't wait to share it with you. Welcome, Susan.
Hi, Danielle.
So good to have you. This is super fun. And I loved Lie by the Pool, too. I read that one recently. I listened to it, actually, recently, which was super fun. Okay, so tell our listeners about Running Cold.
So Running Cold takes place in the Canadian Rockies, which is like my happy place. We visit a town called Banff, Alberta, and it's just the coolest place on earth. It's like these jagged mountain peaks, and then inside is this town inset, and it's charming but spooky. And in the middle of the town is this hotel that's a castle. It's literally made out of stone and has turrets, and it has a history, and people were murdered there. And I visit there every year on Christmas, and I'm like, okay, I have to set a thriller in this castle in the Rockies. And so Running Cold is a story of Julie Adler, and she's an Olympic biathlete. Well, actually, a retired Olympic biathlete. And biathlon is skiing and shooting and takes place in the frigid depths of winter. And so I created this character, and she's an Olympian, and she's falsely accused of murder, and she has to escape arrest in Banff, in the winter, in the mountains. So imagine her. She's a native of winter. She loves winter, and the police are trying to find her in this incredibly dangerous setting.
And at the same time, she has to clear her name because, she's been accused. Her husband is dead in, what, for a moment looks like a suicide, but definitely isn't a suicide. And then in addition, she's got these best friends, which are super fun. These 3, they all live in LA together. These 3 best friends who sort of follow her in this, in this crazy adventure she's having. And at first, of course, she doesn't want to admit how bad things are for her. And then they're all sort of, they show up and surprise her thinking she's like staying in the suite at the hotel, but that's not exactly what's going on. So super fun to get those other female perspectives as well.
Yeah, I love creating the female friendships. I think sort of a signature of my writing is, there's like murder is serious business. So you kind of have to have the friendships and the fun counterpoint. And I try to always have a comedic character who comes in and injects some levity into the circumstances. And she has a best friend named Izzy, who is got some demons of her own. Always
Yes.
a nice person, but is trying to be better. And
Right.
maybe drinks a little too much and says a little too much. So I try to, inject some humor into these dark thrillers. because otherwise it gets too, I think.
Yeah, no, it does, and it's a really nice balance to the moments where she's in real peril, and I like the fact that these are not none of these are perfect humans, including Julie, right? Everybody's kind of got their stuff, and um, but they kind of work through it, and some of the things are you would imagine are a little hard to overcome, but they do it, and I love that about it, and that's exactly right. You put women together in interesting perspectives, and these men, these Julie has a past with a man who adored her for a very long time, who's of course in the story, and but the setting is fabulous. It's fun to know there's a real place there. Do they know that you're killing people in their hotel suites?
No, no, they do not. Although, okay, so this is actually Banff. That's the town. This
Oh,
is the mountain. So we took a photo
beautiful.
of the actual place, which,
Uh-huh.
yay, that they did that. I love that the publisher did that. And in the Banff Springs Hotel, there's murmurs. Like if you read books that aren't endorsed by the Banff Springs Hotel, you'll read about a murder suicide that took place in a room that now doesn't exist. It like goes from 614 to 618, and you're like, where's the room in between? And
Yeah.
apparently, according to the lore, they boarded it up, and who knows what's in there now? Hundreds
Right.
of dead bodies. And also, but one story that is out in the public is there was a wedding, and the bride fell down the stairs, broke her neck, and died on the spot. And it's like they still have weddings there, and it's marked by like a little plaque, like this is where so and so fell down the stairs and died. And you're like, really, we're advertising that? So
And
there's
we're not getting married there, as it turns out. Certainly not unless they can take the elevator to the bottom floor, right? I mean, we're not walking down the stairs. And was she in her wedding dress? Was it like at the wedding?
oh yeah, I think she
Oh.
tripped on her train or something
You
and
can
fell down.
imagine how that happens, right? I mean, having worn a big wedding dress, I can see exactly how she did it.
Right? But the
Yeah.
hotel itself is, I mean, the outside is like stone, and
Mhm.
it just looks like a castle, and inside it looks like a castle. It's like got these big domed open spaces, and
Mhm.
if you look up, there's like gargoyles in the eave that are staring down at you, and the rooms are all oddly shaped, like they have weird crooked
Yeah.
ceilings and stuff. So it's just kind of an amazing place. I'm surprised
And
I'm the first one to do a murder mystery this way.
I know. Well, I love that. And of course, like it's such a thriller writer thing to do, to like go to a beautiful place with your family at Christmas and be like, I think I should kill somebody here. Right?
Right?
So how long have you guys been going there?
So my husband's Canadian and my children are Canadian by association. I mean, we go to Canada every year, and we've been going to Banff for like almost 10 years, I think.
So
Yeah.
it was high time. It was bound to happen.
Right.
So well,
Yeah.
that's so exciting. And this is your um fourth thriller
That's right.
out. And then we talked a little bit about ahead of time. There's some exciting a new book coming really soon. Like you're putting these out fast. When is the next book out?
Yeah. The next one is coming in May 2025. It's
Yeah,
called Letters from Strangers, and it's based on a true story.
I want to hear
My
this.
true story. So my dad passed away in 2016, and when we were sort of clearing out his home office, we opened a drawer and pulled out a folder that was full of love letters that were not from my mom, and
Oh,
that took place during the time of their marriage when I was a child growing up in that house. So I fictionalized the finding of the letters is true, but as the fictionalized jumping off point, the last letter, the mistress says she's pregnant, and then
oh,
the letters stop. And so I'm like, okay, so if that happened, and it may have happened, I don't know. Like
right.
I'm just
You don't
23.
have that letter. Yeah, yeah. You don't, right. That
I
don't. I
mean,
don't know if you want to open that. Just so you know,
yeah.
once you open that box, you can't close it again.
Well, you know what's really interesting is everybody that I tell this story to, they're like, "Oh, I have an uncle who had a secret family, or my grandfather had
Right.
two wives at the same time, or whatever." Like everybody has a story about somebody in their
Yep.
family
Yep.
that has done something like that. When I guess
Yes.
when there was no internet and no ancestry.com and no real way to track it down. So
Yeah.
in the book, the 2025 book, Letters from Strangers, my main character goes in search of this child that was born in secret because she thinks she has a half brother. And so it's her journey of discovering who she really is, right? Because
Yeah.
she thought her family was one perfect thing and that her
Right.
dad was like this wheeler dealer businessman always out closing deals, but he was closing something else. So
Yes, he was, or opening it. So I have a question. Do you have siblings?
I have an older brother.
Okay, and so obviously he's aware of this as well.
I mean, he hasn't read it yet. He knows
But
it
he's
exists.
aware of his dad's history.
Oh, yeah, he knew it the whole time. He knew it while it was happening and he never told me, which was actually really kind because I was close with my dad. And I think my
Yeah.
brother wanted to protect the relationship that I had
Yeah,
with my dad, which is kind of tender and
it is.
kind
And
of
did
him.
your mother know then? She must have known
Oh,
too.
yeah, she knew. I mean, like everybody knew except for me.
Well, I mean, it's interesting too, like the things that I mean, particularly in a certain time in the past, that the women just, just dealt with, right? It was like, what am I going to do about it? You know?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
in
that's
some,
kind of a theme of the book is
yeah,
kind of how the patriarchy was so strong back.
yeah,
I mean, it's a period book and takes place mostly in the 80s and then a time cut to the 2000s. But yeah, there were different standards, and it's like I make the money, I do what I want. I mean, that was the
yeah,
vibe, in at least
yeah,
in my house.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that was probably pretty normal. And is it like this is part of me that's like, of course I'm a little, as we know, jaded now on this whole marriage thing, but it's like part of me is like maybe it was nice to know that somebody else was sort of like taking care, like I mean not nice, but there were probably moments where your mom was like, I'm glad you're out of the house and I have a moment to myself, right? I mean, but then of course that's not true. You can't really convince yourself of that for very long. I'm sure it was really
Well, and I
hard.
think it's hard too, and the sacrifices women, I mean, it's usually women make when they know this is happening, but it would really disrupt the kids' lives to
Hmm.
break up a family, and they decide not
Yeah.
to. I mean, in some ways, I believe like we should be in truth, and if that's happening, you should confront it head on and make the
Yeah.
decision that's best for you, the wife, the mother. But also,
Yeah.
I respect the wife mother who says, you know what, it's too disruptive, or maybe I don't have it in me to manage it
Yeah.
right now.
Right. And it
And
not only did you not have it in you, but at that day, a time, there weren't like, what you then had to support you. I mean, even if she got, you know, spousal support and child support, it's still a very scary thing to go from a situation where you're taken care of and that, the finances are provided for and probably in most of them he's handling, a lot of it. And all of a sudden you'd be doing it on your own. It's got to be terrifying. It probably feels, like insurmountable for some people. I know it still feels insurmountable. I have friends who are going through a divorce. It just feels like they're like, I just don't know how I'm going to figure this out. And they do, of course, but I can imagine that's really terrifying too, right?
I mean, also leaving a home, close friends of mine who got divorced, they went from what feels like a home with a yard
Yeah.
and a community to both parties, man and wife, have to downsize, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
then the kids do too. And that can be jarring.
Yeah. I mean, it is disruptive. I mean, my kids are fully grown. They're 22 and 24, so they were 20 and 22 when all this happened with us. And I mean, there's just no age at which you sort of take your parents' divorce in stride. So I can completely understand. But it sounds like it was a long affair, which is just, it's one thing, you think, I don't know, a couple times, but as you know from my own experience, a long affair is quite different. And this sounds like it was even longer.
I mean, 9 years worth of letters, that's what it was in true life, and that's what I borrowed for the book.
Yeah.
I don't know if there were kids. I totally made that up
Yeah.
for the
Because of
book.
course that makes it more, I mean, that obviously makes it way more, thrilling. Do we
Yeah, and
know
I
if
had to give the
yeah.
protagonist something to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To
Something to
go
find.
looking.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. To go looking for. Yeah, I do think all that stuff is super fascinating. And, the ways that we sort of relationships disappoint us. You know, every relationship is like, right, it's never everything that we dream of, and what we're willing to accept and what we're not, and how it reflects. I mean, you feel this too, how it changes how you see your dad, right?
Well, not only that, but how I see myself. There was a
Yeah,
dynamic in my house growing up that I thought I understood. And I was in my
yeah,
40s when I found out like everything that I thought about how my dad treated me and where he was and um, how strong my family was and how like we were living in truth. Like all that just was like a grenade went off. And I was like,
yeah,
wow, those things that my dad said to me have like a totally different color on them now.
yeah, right,
And when he
right.
got mad at me and accused me of things, I felt bad and I felt shame. But I was like, wait a minute, he was
Yeah,
doing so much worse. So how
right,
can you tell
right.
me like he got so mad at me? Like a big thing in our house growing up was like, you can do whatever, you can crash the car, I will forgive you, but do not lie to me. Like that was his thing.
I know.
And
Isn't
and
that
from when I was
ironic?
little, the only time I ever got the belt was when I told a lie. And now I'm
Yeah.
like, his whole life was a lie. He was lying to all of us every single day. And he took off his belt and whooped me when I told a lie.
Yeah,
And
it
and
does.
the
Right. It's so right, right. And you just wonder like what was going through his mind. Now, I mean, that is another thing, right? To sort of extrapolate like how he felt about what he was doing. And it's really interesting. I mean, humans are so human. We just mess up in so many ways. And of course, we are such a series of contradictions. So I love that. I'm really looking forward to that. Let's go back to Running Cold because this book is so, and it's so a perfect like cuddle up on the couch because you're just freezing from the very first moment until the very last moment. And I want to find out like how did you do, how a biathlete is a very specific Olympian. It's not it's not your average sort of what we expect to hear about. And so what made Julia a biathlete? What was the sort of how'd you
Yeah,
learn
that's
about
a
that?
great question. I mean, I knew I wanted to set it in the mountains, and my first impulse was like, oh, she'll be a skier. And then it was
Yes.
actually my husband who was like, well, you're writing a thriller and there should be weapons involved, right?
Yes. So
So
smart, right.
I was like, oh, I need to do some research on that. And I could tell you lots of boring things about biathlon, how it started in the mountains of Russia and Finland, because that's where warfare took place a lot of times when there were skirmishes and then it became a sport. But I did do the research on it and I just thought it's something new to introduce readers to. And there is skiing, there's downhill skiing, there's cross country skiing, and there's shooting. And and I just thought that was a really dynamic thing to make a protagonist. I mean, do you go through that, Danielle, when you're writing? Like, okay, I know the story and I know what needs to happen. So, what's her job?
Yeah, what I know. I'm always people are always like, does she have a job? And I'm like, it's just inconvenient for her to have a job right now. Everything going on in her life, she does not have time for a job. But of course, she has a job. Well, the other thing I love about it is that a biathlon largely is cross country skiing, right? I mean, it's not downhill skiing. So there are, there is, and we won't. There's no spoilers, but there is a rather, like quick place where she's sort of downhill skiing, and it isn't as though that's really her expertise,
That's
right? I
right.
mean, she can do it, but there's people who do it better, and one of them might be chasing her, and that is so you have this incredible athlete who's also sort of a little, and she hasn't it's been a long time since she trained, so she's a little bit off her game, and she feels very, very vulnerable, and then there's a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
it's cold and she doesn't
it,
have a coat.
yeah, and right, and there's a crossing there's a lot of obstacles besides snow in winter. So no, it was a super fun, and I did, as I told you before we started the podcast, I just I read it in sort of like one sitting because it's one of those and I love that like the chapters are short and they leave you on a little hook, and you're like, oh, I can read one more. And then literally, next thing you know, you've read like 50 pages. So that's super, super fun. So
Well, this
that's
book is
really,
more action, has more action than my last. I don't know. How do you feel about writing action?
I'm,
Do you
I, it's funny because this new book has less action for me than, I mean, are you kidding? I love action. I think it's the easiest way to, create, a compulsive read because you're like, people literally turn the pages because they have to know sort of that our character is okay. I think it sort of makes it feel like it goes faster sometimes, the writing.
Yeah, shorter sentences, shorter
Hmm.
paragraphs, sometimes not complete sentences. It's like you
Yeah.
just want to be there and try to
Yeah.
move the writing at the pace that the action is moving,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
you don't
And
go
I,
into inner monologue, you just keep going.
no,
And
no,
I
she can
think
think
it's
about all
exciting,
this later. She doesn't have
but
time to
it's
think right
hard.
now.
Like I run out of verbs, like
I know.
explode, run,
Yeah.
like
It's so
how many
true.
ways can you
Right.
put her in motion? So it's a challenge from the technical part.
But you do it really well because a lot of it has to do with sort of the environment and the cold and and the cold and the snow and the the wind and like and they're driving somewhere and that whole thing is very accurate what it's like to be caught in a storm and to be like there's a storm coming and we got to get moving. There is this, I mean, that all the sort of the winter in it when you live in a place with a real winter, which of course you do not, but I do. There's this there is this sense of sort of like when things start to get, a storm starts to come in, you got to be really aware of like how long it's going to take you to get out of wherever you are or to get to wherever you need to be, and can you have the time to do it? And then it can change. It can change. So it's another villain in the book. You know, winter.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for saying that. I mean, it is. There's high stakes when the wind is blowing and the power goes out, and
Yes,
it's night and it's freezing. But there's also like this strange dichotomy because like a snow-covered landscape
I
is
know.
so beautiful and peaceful, and so I want to
Yeah,
play with that a little bit. Like there's moments when it's storming, but then when the storm stops and the
yeah,
snow is glistening like diamonds, and it's Christmas time, and like
yes.
you can just take a deep breath and be like, oh, the universe is good. Right?
Yes, I mean, I think that's exactly right. And you get both of those, and you feel both of those when you live in the mountains. And if you're living inside a like a warm home, there's also the fun part of like it's really brutal and storming out there, and I'm staying here. There's nothing that's going to get me out of this house today because it is, it's miserable. But when you don't have that choice, which she does not, then it's very precarious, and people die all the time, right? I mean they get stuck in the snow cloud and you can't see which way is up or there's an avalanche and we lose people every year that way, and it is really really, so it's a really fun environment to be in because the stakes are really high.
Yeah, thanks. When people ask me like where I got the idea for the plot, there was a movie back in the 90s called The Fugitive starring Harrison Ford.
Sure.
And so it's Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones, and it's this two-hander.
Yes.
Harrison Ford escapes arrest, and everyone thinks he killed his wife, and it's in the papers. And um, he escapes arrest in this most spectacular fashion.
Yes, he does.
And I'm like, how do I beat that?
Yeah. No,
And
you did a very fabulous job. And I love, we're not spoiling it, but I love what she does in that situation because she also sort of proves her worth by what she does.
yeah, I mean,
We can't
well,
talk about it.
Harrison Ford does a thing when he's in a bus crash, and then there's a train bearing down on the bus.
Right.
This is from the movie
Yeah.
The Fugitive, and there's people on the bus, and Harrison Ford
Right.
has to. In screenwriting, we call it the save the cat moment, where
Yes.
a character's true character is revealed by their action. Like he could run
Yes.
because he's wanted by the police, and the longer he
Right.
stays there, the more likely they are going to find him. But the right thing to do is save as many people on that bus as he can.
Yes.
So when people ask me like, so what's it about? I tell them it's The Fugitive, but with chicks in a snowstorm,
Yeah.
because the detective that's in search of
Yes.
Julia is a woman, because of
Yes,
course.
I love her character too. And I love that we get to see, we get to be in the point of view of some of the other characters. So we really get to see sort of the whole story, which is super fun to just, see it from, because everybody's slant on things is a little different. You can totally understand why one person believes something when actually that's not the reality, right?
Yeah, and one thing that I thought was really interesting to explore, Julie as a former Olympian, she holds herself to a really high standard, and there's a lot
Right.
like she tries to be excellent in everything, and then she's in the situation where she's accused of these abhorrent things,
Yeah.
and how would a person who has strived her whole life to be a role model
Right.
react to
Right.
suddenly being under scrutiny for murder?
Right.
hard for
It's yeah, very, as we would hope for any good protagonist, being accused of murder is not your best day.
well said.
Yeah. So this is super exciting. So this is out actually as we speak. This book is out and available to you. It's coming out on October 8th, and today is the 10th of October. So go grab your copy. It feels like exactly the right kind of book to be reading in the craziness that is going to be October for us all. It's super fast, and it will take your mind off of anything else you just do not want to be thinking about right now.
Thank you.
Tell us where to find you online, Susan, so we can keep an eye on everything else you're doing.
Oh yeah, so I have a website that sort of tracks all the books that are coming out, and I do a little bit of movies and television too, and that's susanwalterwriter.com. And I have a newsletter you can sign up for, and I give away a lot of things in my newsletter. Books,
Fun.
not just my books. I give away other people's books too. I have a habit of like buying people's books, getting them signed at conferences, bringing them home, and then I'm like, oh, I have too many books. I guess I'll give them away. So
I love that. Who doesn't love a free book? I mean, everybody I know, and I can't help myself too. If there's books available, I have a million books, but I'm like, oh, of course I need another book. Of course I do.
Right?
Yes.
I just went to see Laura Dave, and this will probably be the next one I gave away. Do you have it?
Yeah, I actually interviewed her for that book. It came out I think a couple of weeks ago, and I have a giveaway for that too. So that's the other thing is go to the Danielle's Killer Women on Facebook. That's our Facebook page, because we always give away a copy of every book we feature, and super fun to have a chance to win free books. It's not a huge group, so I think people win pretty often, which I also think is kind of fun. So we're sort of intimate. We're a little intimate group. So Susan, super fun. I love this. Running Cold was so fun, and I can't wait to read the next one. It's just, you've got a lot going on, girl. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for having me on. You're
Absolutely
amazing. You're such an inspiration. And congratulations on can I mention your new deal? That you just
thank you.
have a new book coming out, and I saw champagne on your Instagram feed. Can you tell us
Yes.
what the title is and when that's coming?
Yeah, well, that's super sweet. I sold a book to Emily Bessler Books, which is a imprint of Atria under Simon & Schuster, and it's called Pinky Swear, and it's going to be out in the spring of 2026. So
wow.
lots of time to lots of time to talk about that, and I'm sure at some point I'll have advanced reader copies, which we will give away. It's super fun. But you're sweet, and it is, as we know, this is a crazy business to be in, super insane. So we celebrate the highs. And just eat lots of ice cream when we hit the lows.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today on Killer Women with Susan Walter, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.